I'd like to remind everyone I would like them to either turn off their cell phones or silence them or something. That did while we were having the meeting. First order of business is under full business planning board. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes of January 25th, February 8th, and February 10th?
Can't hear you.
Twice live.
Don?
There you go. I got it.
You got me? I'll reiterate, have you received those copies of those minutes? Comments, corrections? Hearing done, those minutes will stand as published.
We still can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, for those of you who didn't hear us, we just approved the minutes of our previous meetings. Just a little housekeeping short. Okay, we'll move on to new business, which is the 189 Strikers Road, Block 100, Lot 6, asphalt plant application for preliminary and final maintenance site plan approval, or the applicant's here.
Yes, sir.
We have a, if you approach the podium, please identify yourself, say where you live, or who you represent.
I know, Jennifer Carrick, President Shulman, and Jeremy.
Speak close to the mic.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Jennifer Carrick from Price Mead Shulman and Yamania. As the board is undoubtedly aware, we represent the plaintiffs in the pending action. We submitted correspondence to the board with regard to our position that the board does not have jurisdiction to hear this matter this evening. Based upon case law, we believe that the board is divested of jurisdiction while there is a pending litigation. Specifically, there's a prerogative writ that asserts a variety of substantive and procedural challenges to the board's prior actions relative to this applicant. Should the board disregard the divestiture of jurisdiction and choose to proceed, we are hereby providing formal notice of this objection. This in no way constitutes a waiver of any rights available to our client in this matter, and we reserve all remedies available in law or otherwise.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, chairman, and the public. My name is Neela Fair-DeShare, Archer and Griner. Tom Hurden has appeared before. We represent the owner of Precast Concrete Manufacturing. I'm here just to enter an appearance. I do want to make one note, which is there's an environmental impact statement that was prepared by the engineer dated August 2011. A copy of that was provided to the objectors pursuant to an Oprah request, but only every other page was provided. I discovered last week that we had only every other page, and we requested a complete copy. We have it, and I'm just wondering who else may not have received a complete copy.
Go ahead.
After my appearance, Jonathan D. Drill from Stickle, Koenig & Sullivan. I'm representing the Township of Greenwich, which at this point is an interested party. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council, members of the board. My name is William G. Menon. I am here representing the applicant in this matter, 189 Strikers Road Associates, LLC. We earlier today submitted correspondence in response to that which was submitted by the firm of Price Meese. We contend that the cases cited by Ms. Kinerick in her letter are not applicable to the facts in this specific case, most notably the fact that in litigation initiated by Ms. Kinerick on behalf of her clients, she contends that the prior approval granted by this board is void. Void because of action taken by your township committee in adopting a new ordinance governing the permitted use of asphalt manufacture. So it's our position that we're here on a wholly new application seeking approval under a wholly new ordinance. And in fact, we're trying to correct an alleged deficiency that Ms. Kinerick herself has levied against this board and against this application. So with that, we would respectfully submit that the application ought to be able to proceed this evening. I don't know if you wish to discuss that further, or if you'd like, I can continue with my opening statement.
I'll just mention that I reviewed what Ms. Kinerick had given with reference to the argument by her client that this should not be heard if the board lacks jurisdiction under the set of facts as presented. Can you hear me out there? Yeah. Okay. I'll just repeat that I have reviewed the memo submitted by Ms. Kinerick, who represents an objector, and I have reviewed the memo submitted by Mr. Menon, and I am of the opinion that this board does maintain jurisdiction to hear the case tonight. I don't believe that the cases that were cited in the memo of Ms. Kinerick were on point. I believe that I note from the record that the applicant is not even mentioned in those, is not a party to those lawsuits, and therefore I don't feel that there's a bar to the hearing of this application. Obviously, it's up to the board to make that decision, but that's my advice as your attorney. If there's any discussion, you can discuss it. Otherwise, I will continue with the hearing.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none. It's the opinion of the chair that we will continue with the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, William G. Menon here on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined this evening by Daniel Bernstein, who will be assisting me in this matter. The property which forms the subject of this application is located along Strikers Road here in Lopatcong Township, otherwise known as Lot 6 in Block 100. It's in your ROM zone. As you are all no doubt aware, this applicant and this property were the subject of two previous approvals. On September 28, 2011, the applicant received conditional use approval and related preliminary and final site plan approval so as to permit the construction and operation of an asphalt manufacturing facility on the property. And on November 30, 2011, the applicant received preliminary and final major subdivision approval so as to permit the subdivision of the existing lot into two lots. The applicant believes that those prior approvals are valid and remain in force. However, sometime after the applicant obtained its September 28, 2011 approval, the Township Committee replaced the prior municipal ordinance which permitted, amongst other things, asphalt and concrete manufacturing facilities with a new ordinance, Ordinance 2011-15, permitting those uses. It has been alleged by two objectors that the Township Committee's actions in adopting the new ordinance somehow invalidate our previously obtained approval. The applicant believes, therefore, that it is prudent to represent our case with substantially similar testimony and witnesses in an effort to obtain substantially similar approvals now that ordinance number 2011-15 is in place. We ask for your indulgence and thank you in advance for your patience, as some of what you are about to hear will be a repeat of what was presented in September and November. To be clear, however, despite the fact that some of the testimony will be the same as before, this is a new application. We have included the previously obtained subdivision in our presentation this evening as well, because both approvals are intertwined. As a part of our application this evening, we are also asking you to reapprove that subdivision which you approved in November. The subdivision portion of the application is conforming to your zoning ordinance, irrespective of any ordinance changes or replacements which may have occurred. As was the case previously, however, we are requesting planning variances related to the fact that the parcels will not have frontage on a public street. They will have frontage on a private street. As for the site plan portion of the application, the applicant seeks permission to construct and operate an asphalt manufacturing facility, a conditionally permitted use. The application, as you will hear through the course of testimony, meets those conditions. Those conditions are set forth in Lopatcong Ordinance Section 243-77.6. That ordinance is valid and enforceable. I know that there are those who are upset with the township for having adopted that ordinance section. That is their right, and we respect that right. These proceedings tonight, however, are not the appropriate venue to argue about the ordinance. As an applicant, we are entitled to proceed in accordance with the current ordinance, and as a deliberative body, you are charged to decide this application based upon its conformance or lack thereof with that ordinance. We are in receipt of review letters from your professionals, one from Mr. Ritter, dated February 14, 2012, and one from Mr. Sturbins, dated February 17, 2012. Let me state clearly from the beginning, we have no issue complying with any of the suggestions within those letters, and we will do so to your professionals' satisfaction. In those letters, there are some areas where your professionals have asked for us to expound or provide further testimony, and we will do so during the course of these proceedings. It's our intention to call as witnesses an environmental scientist, a managerial executive of the operating company, a licensed architect, a professional engineer, a traffic engineer, an air quality expert, and a professional planner. Before we proceed with the public hearing portion of our presentation, Mr. Chairman, there are some submission waivers that are referenced in Mr. Sturbins' February 17 review letter that we need action on to be deemed complete. I would note that Mr. Sturbins in his letter indicates he has no issue with the granting of any of those. So if you'd like, we can present justification and testimony for those as you wish.
Public protocol, our engineer, you have any comments?
Can you pick me up? Okay. As is customary in my report, I have two sections to the report. The latter section is the technical portion of the report. The initial section deals with administrative issues. We refer to that as completeness. Just to give the public some background here, in every land use ordinance, there are requirements or criteria for what needs to be submitted by an applicant at the time that they file an application with the board, whether it be a subdivision application or a site plan application. The applicant has a right to seek waivers from those requirements, and also has a right, if they feel that items are not applicable, to indicate on the checklist that they're not applicable. So that has been done in this particular case, and I had an opportunity as part of our review to look at the completeness issues. And first and foremost, and this is on pages 6 through 8 of my report, there are no deficiencies with respect to what has been submitted to the board. All the items that were required, other than those items that were where waivers are being requested or items have been deemed to be not applicable by the applicant, have been provided. So the only issue at this time is looking at the items that the applicant has requested submission waivers for, and the items that the applicant has denoted to be not applicable on the very checklist that are in question tonight. And I've listed those items again on pages 6 through 8. I think all the waivers are reasonable, and I'm in agreement with all the items that have been noted to be not applicable, because I don't think they are applicable to this particular application. So if the board is in agreement with my assessment here, you should deem you should grant those waivers, acknowledge the non-applicability denotations on the checklist, and deem the application to be complete.
Do I have any questions from the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to deem the application complete.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Members Camperine,
Yes.
Coyle,
Yes.
France,
Yes.
Lance,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Chairman Hensley.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, with your indulgence, I'd like to call our first witness.
If you would give me a minute, please. I'd just like to explain to the public the way this will work is the applicant will call his experts to testify, present his case to the board. When the applicant, each individual specialist completes his presentation, you may approach the podium, state your name, address, township you live in, and you may ask specific questions related to his testimony. This is not the point where you can express opinion or anything like that, but you may question their experts. With that being said, I would also like to indicate that our normal time that we would stop hearing testimony would be 10 p.m. at a normal board hearing. Since we're a little bit out of the ordinary tonight, I'm going to extend that to 11 o'clock this evening to give us the time to make up. If we approach that time, we see we're not going to complete it in a reasonable amount of time, we will adjourn and we will reconvene tomorrow night at the school here to start right on. So, understanding that, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call our first witness, Jeff Terrella.
Sir, could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Torello, could you do me a favor and give the board the benefit of your education and experience?
Sure, I have a bachelor's of ornamental horticulture and botany with a minor in soils from Delaware Valley College of Science and Agriculture in Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
And give a brief recitation of your experience, if you would.
I am a wetland ecologist. I specialize in all aspects of freshwater wetlands and flood hazard riparian zones. I've been practicing since 1988 in the state of New Jersey.
Have you testified before boards or commissions in the state of New Jersey and been accepted as an expert in the field of environmental science?
Yes, numerous boards throughout many counties in New Jersey and have always been accepted.
And to reiterate, you've been an environmental scientist in excess of 20 years?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that this witness be accepted as an expert in the field of environmental science.
So accepted.
Can we have questions, qualifications?
Juan Deere, if you wish, could you state your name, please?
Yeah, Jonathan E. Drill, again, on behalf of Greenwich Township. Are you proposing him as an environmental expert or a wetlands expert?
We're proposing him as an environmental expert and a wetlands expert.
Okay, so what experience, I understand your wetlands experience, I've read it, it's attached to the environmental impact statement. What other environmental experience do you have besides wetlands?
I've done lots of vegetative analysis, wildlife inventories, tree surveys.
Okay, so as an environmental expert, he's then limiting his testimony to wetlands and,
Well, I'm not sure what they're going to ask me, so I can't.
well, that's what I'm wondering, because if he's going to be deemed an expert, I'd like to know what fields you're going to be going into to find out if you qualify for those fields or not.
Wetlands, horticulture, potentially, endangered species. If you're inquiring as to whether it's going to be testifying as an environmental science on any of the issues of air, no, that'll be a subsequent witness.
The board has accepted him as an expert in the field.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Torella, did your firm perform a wetlands analysis of the subject property?
Yes.
And were you yourself on the subject property?
Yes, I'm a one-person firm. I do all of the field work, all of the report writing, and all of the 100% of the submissions to DEP.
Is the subject property on the same side of Stryker's Road as the cell tower, which is purported to house nesting osprey?
No.
Are there any wetlands or riparian buffers on the subject property?
No.
Do you anticipate receiving a letter of interpretation from NJDEP confirming the fact that there are no wetlands or riparian buffers on the property?
Yes.
In your experience as an environmental scientist, will NJDEP's treatment of the subject property be different if in fact there are ospreys nesting on top of a cell tower on an adjoining parcel?
If there were regulated areas on the subject property, i.e. wetlands or riparian zones, a nesting osprey could trigger a larger wetland buffer than what would normally be assessed. However, in this case, A, there are no wetlands, so there are no buffers of wetlands, and this site is already located within a trout production Category 1 water area. A trout production water carries the highest wetland buffer possible, 150 feet if you have wetlands, and a Category 1 water classification carries the highest riparian buffer, which is 300 feet. So regardless of any rare and endangered wildlife or species present on or adjacent to a property, that would not affect the size of the buffers that would apply to a site like this if there were those areas, which there are not, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further on direct for this witness.
Anybody on the board? Anyone else have questions for this witness? Hearing none, is there anyone from the audience that would like to have a point-specific question to this person? Please approach the podium, state your name, address, township you live in.
My name is Karen Risco. I live at 1202 Fairview Circle in Lopatcong. And my question is directed to you, sir. Would you live next door to this place?
Which place are you talking?
The Asphalt.
I'm going to rule that question as being out of order. That's not point-specific to what the testimony was. You'll have your opportunity in the public portion to express your opinions and ask questions of that type. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Garabo, 2 Cottonwood Court, Lopatcong. I didn't bring a gun. Garabo, G-A-R-A-B-O. I just had maybe just a point of... Thank you. Just if you could clarify, it sounded to me like you were saying there were some riparian zones. I don't even know what that means, but it sounded to me like you were saying there's a trout stream that does warrant some, I guess, categorization as a buffer zone. But then it seemed to me that you were saying that wetlands and riparian zones are not applicable in this case. Can you clarify that? Sure.
In the state of New Jersey, wetlands have their own set of rules, and streams have their own set of rules. Streams fall under flood hazard rules. Wetlands fall under the freshwater wetlands rules. Wetlands under the Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act are classified into 3 different categories. Ordinary resource value wetlands, the lowest value, 0 buffer. Intermediate resource value wetlands, which have a 50-foot buffer from the wetland line, and exceptional resource value wetlands, which have a 150-foot buffer from the wetland line. These classifications are based on 2 things. The main one is where the site drains to. And the way you figure that out is you look on topography maps and you find out the closest named stream to a subject property in a flow direction. And every single stream in New Jersey has a classification associated with it. In this case, we drain from the Lopatcong, which is classified as a trout production water, which is the highest water quality. With that comes a 150-foot wetland buffer. Skipping ahead to the other set of regulations, the flood hazard regulations that protect streams, that's a separate set of regulations. The Lopatcong Creek has a Category 1 classification, so that is a 300-foot buffer. So the streams have a 300-foot buffer from the top of bank, either side of the top of bank. The wetlands have a 150-foot buffer. So, you could have, if you pictured that this was a stream and it was obviously flowing horizontally, you could have, this would have a 300-foot buffer from either side of the microphone stand. Essentially a 600-foot buffer plus the width of the stream. You could then have a wetland area. If it was very steep on this side and came right down to the stream, there would generally be wetlands on this side. If it was really low on this side, you might have a wetland line that was way out here. You would have 150 feet from that spot out. So it's a little confusing because there are 2 sets of regulations. Oftentimes, the 300-foot riparian buffer of a stream might be bigger than the 150-foot wetland line. Sometimes the wetland line could stick out farther than the 300-foot riparian zone if there's a lot more wetlands associated with the stream. In this case, there are neither wetlands on the site or streams on the site. That doesn't mean that you can't have these buffers on the site. If you had wetlands within 50 feet of this property, you would have 100 feet of buffer encroaching on this property. 50 feet off-site, 100 feet on-site. There are no off-site wetlands or buffers or riparian buffers within the property.
Okay, so within the property, that's where I was confused, because there obviously are wetlands and riparian zones near the property.
Well, adjacent to, near is vague, but in terms of the type of application that we applied for an application called a presence or absence of wetlands letter of interpretation. There's a few different types of letter of interpretation applications. This one that we applied for, you only use when you know that there are no wetlands or buffers on the property. It's the one that you use when you know that there's nothing on the property. If there were wetlands directly adjacent to the property, I would have applied for a different type of letter of interpretation, which would have stated...
I'm sorry, did you say that wetlands were adjacent to the property?
No.
I thought you, because I said near, you said adjacent.
Oh, no. I don't know. I know that there's a stream adjacent to, and I know it's at least 700 feet away, which is, to me, not near, considering the buffer is 300 feet. So it's not near the property. But when we do a wetland delineation, we not only check the subject property, but we check the area directly adjacent to the subject property to see if any buffers would cast over, because that's still regulated.
Okay, fair enough. So basically the assessment as to whether or not the area is wetlands or not is subject to your interpretation.
Once my work is done and I make my assessment, I submit a formal application to the DEP. The DEP comes out to the site, inspects the site, inspects my report, my map, and then makes a determination if they agree with me. If they agree with me, they issue the letter of interpretation. If they don't, they ask me to edit the map.
And they agree with you based on sending some actual people out?
Every single site gets a site visit from the DEP. Every single one.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Let me explain something just for the audience, make clear up some things or more satisfy people a little bit more in terms of what takes place. The planning board, if we approve this application, as part of that resolution, we will have conditions in the resolution. One of the conditions in the resolution will deal with DEP approval, which is the wetlands and the encroachment and so on and so forth. So we hear what this gentleman has to say, and the planning board makes its decision based upon that. But it doesn't stop there in terms of their requirements. We also put a condition in the resolution, if it's approved, that would force the applicant to go to the DEP for any of the subject matters that they have control over and get approval from them and submit that to the board also. So that's one example. DOT would be another example, or things along that line. So that's a general thing that we do.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Yes, please pose, state your name, address, count 50 words.
My name is Jerry Hartley. I live here in Lopatcong at 9 Foster Lane. I have some questions, and some of my questions have to do with the site in relation to the buffer zones. I know that we're talking here about the setbacks, the requirements from the Class C1 river stream, but it's very hard for the audience to basically see what we're really talking about, because we never had to look at the site plan before, and it's very hard for us to evaluate the relationship of the topography in relationship to the stream. So is it possible for me to ask you questions and talk about that? Is that okay?
If it's within his field of expertise. So.
Okay. For the audience, sir, could you basically show me on the map where the stream is and where the buffer zones are, so the audience can see that as well?
I only know that the Lopatcong stream exists in the rear, well off the rear of the site.
Okay, sir, that map's a little small. I don't think the audience can see it. Is there a way to enlarge that, or do we have a larger map? Can everybody?
These are pretty big.
So yeah, well, sir, everybody has to understand the impact.
Yeah, okay. Can you see this?
No, I can't really, sir. You know, we're looking at an audience back here. It's probably 400 feet.
Can you picture in your mind?
No, sir, I cannot picture it in my mind.
I'm asking you a question.
That all of these plans and documents have been on file in the clerk's office, available for inspection or review by any member of the public, in excess of the 10 days prior to this hearing.
Yes, sir, but this is the first application, and you are submitting this application for the first time.
You're out of order. You're now expressing an opinion. Please retire.
Excuse me, sir, but he's expressed his opinion. So
I can answer your question. If you can picture 700 feet, if you can picture 700 feet in your mind.
relate to a map, please.
You said you couldn't see it.
Sorry, sir, this gentleman's in my way. I can't see it.
Our subject property, this is the access road right here. This is Stryker's Road. Stryker's Lane.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Why don't we have the exhibit marked since we're going to refer to it? This, council, would you like me to mark it as an A1 for today's date?
A1, just identify what that is, please. A1, today's date, 22. And then, can either the expert or the applicant identify what that is? It looks like a photo.
For the purposes of the record, the exhibit that's just been marked as A1 is an aerial shot of the subject area, including the subject parcel and the areas surrounding the subject parcel.
Do you have any idea the age or how long ago that was taken? Does it show approximately what's there today?
The exhibit itself is dated September 26, 2011.
Thank you.
So the subject property is accessed through this flag stem, and the property comes down to here, to this line across, and roughly like this. The Lopatcong Creek doesn't show on this map. This might be a little piece of it here, but it runs sort of, oh, I lost my map. It starts over here.
Can you give me direction for the record?
Yes, southeast of the subject property, down Stryker Road, down in this area. It comes across and flows in, and this might be a little bit of it here, and then it flows back this way. There is also some other little tributary somewhere around this way, so the closest part of the stream to the property is 650 to 750 or 800-ish feet off-site.
You are an environmental engineer, sir?
Yes, sir.
So you understand how to do the site plan?
Do I know how to read a site plan?
Yes.
Yes, I sure do.
Could you tell the audience?
That's actually an aerial photograph.
Well, yes, I know. Could you tell me what the elevation of the site is at that point?
No. An engineer can answer that.
We intend to introduce that testimony through the engineer. It's going to be a subject.
The reason why I'm asking this question is that it has to do with the fall of water from the site. Being from the site, I know that the elevation is quite high there, and the stream...
It'll be answered when the engineer testifies. I'm not asking, I don't want you to express your reasons for asking the question. Just when it becomes the appropriate time, you can ask the question.
Okay. If the fall of water was falling away from the site towards the stream, is there a buffer or a relationship to that, and would there be an impact to the class 1 water stream? Because it appears to me that the water stream is at the gully of our site here, or your proposed site.
Is that the what?
Gully. Meaning that the lowest point.
Well, I do know that the water flows from high spot to low spot, and it looks as if from the topographic survey that we have, for the on-site, it flows from the north to the south, and it eventually is going into the Lopatcong Creek.
That's the point that I was trying to make.
I'd like to warn the audience that I will not tolerate any outbursts, whether food, clapping, or anything like that.
Now that we have established that fact, could you tell me where the stormwater management pool is on site?
The engineer will address that.
Again, that'll be addressed by another expert.
If the stormwater management is in an area that's going to be seeping into the fall of the stream that has a concentration that's much higher than normal pollutants, do you think that would affect the Class C water stream?
That would be answered by the engineer.
Again, sir, this is not his area of expertise.
But he is a biologist, are you, sir?
But it's not.
He says that he's an environmental engineer. Are you a biologist?
I wasn't called an environmental engineer. I was called an environmental scientist. I specialize in wetlands.
Would you be a biologist under that classification?
Would I what?
Are you a biologist?
No, I'm a wetland ecologist.
Okay.
That's what we stated just a few minutes ago.
Just wanted to clarify that. Well, you've answered some of my questions for now.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
As a wetland.
Ma'am, please state your name.
Nicole Beaton, I'm from Greenwich Township. I live at 117 Birch Lane. F-E-E-N-A-N. As a wetlands expert, you deal with streams, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the stream in question, the Lopat stream, can you guarantee that it will not be contaminated by anything coming out of the asphalt plant, as an expert? Can you guarantee that?
That's not my area of expertise.
Expertise, okay, so you can't.
No.
So why are you here?
I'm here to talk about the wetlands.
Again, ma'am, please make your
And I think that's a valid question.
opinion.
I'm asking, what is he bringing to discuss with
He's
you?
already explained his qualifications and what he's testifying.
So basically, he hasn't talked about anything about except buffers and how they're not relevant.
That was the questions that were asked of him.
Not that they're not relevant, they don't appear on the property. All of the buffers are relevant, but there aren't any on the property. There aren't any wetlands and wetland buffers, and there aren't any streams.
So you
or
can't
riparian
answer
zones.
any questions about contamination
No,
to the stream?
no.
Okay. Thank you.
Somebody will be able to.
Any further questions of this witness? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Chris Aquila. I live in Lopatcong.
Do you have an address?
Yes. 1325 Eagles Nest Court. My last name is spelled A-Q-U-I-L-A. Jeff, did you indicate you were not a biologist a moment ago?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Jeff, did you conduct the wildlife studies on the property?
Did I conduct one on this property?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Jeff,
There was a natural heritage search done, which is letters, a database that is run by the DEP that describes wildlife on properties.
so no wildlife inventorying was actually done?
I know that they did a natural heritage search, but I don't know if they, you mean physically on the?
Yeah.
Well, I was on the field,
Okay,
on the
so-
site, but I wasn't there to conduct a wildlife survey.
Okay, so no wildlife surveying has been done on this property
I
per
did not
se
know.
physically?
All I know is I did not conduct one.
He can't tell you whether there was or not.
Okay, so it wasn't. All right, well,
He can't tell you whether there was or not.
okay. Thank you. Fair enough. I think that answers a lot right there. So we don't know specific type of mammal studies were done on the property?
Sir, he's already testified, he hasn't done that type of stuff.
Okay.
I'm a wetland expert. I study wetlands. I did a wetland study on the property. And any sort of wildlife issues associated with wetland areas are answered through the permit that we applied for. And since there are no wetlands or buffers or streams on the property, that's something that won't even appear in our permit. That's why we applied for the natural heritage search, which also showed that there were no rare and endangered wildlife species on the property. Or within their zones. And the Osprey has a 4-mile zone, and that didn't even show up.
Were you aware when you were on the property that there were ospreys 850 feet away?
No, but I also did the study on the property across the street and was under that cell tower for probably 5 consecutive days, and they weren't there last year.
The ospreys in question, did you know they've been nesting there for 5 years?
No. I was there last year and did not see them.
Okay. Did you know they raised 2 chicks this past summer?
No, I have some other areas that I've been looking at. I don't keep a database of osprey.
I realize that. Do you feel that searching the database on the computer is a accurate assessment of the wildlife resources for the property?
Sir, I don't think that's his expertise.
Yeah.
Are you testifying as an expert, or are you questioning as an expert, or?
Just asking.
I've done a lot of wildlife inventories in the past, and I know that a site that is a cornfield has the lowest amount of wildlife that you could normally find in a non-developed parcel of land, especially when surrounded by development. But I wasn't asked to do a wildlife inventory on this property.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am Jovino Jackson, retired Filipino engineer, now residing at Jackson Road, Stewart Bay.
I'm sorry.
Spell your name for the report. Jovino, G-O-V-I-N-O. Jackson, D-I-A-N-G-S-O-N. I just want to be clarified on what performance we're asking for approval for the subdivision that will include asphalt manufacturing. The proponent I heard was mentioning always asphalt manufacturing, but the way I understand, asphalt is the byproduct of oil processing or refining. For the proponent, clarify that.
I'm sorry, I have trouble understanding. Is he asking whether
He wasn't asking me a question. I think he's asking a question about the byproducts of asphalt mining. And
Asphalt is the byproduct of oil refining.
right.
Right?
Yes. Oh, I guess. I'm not an asphalt man. What are they applying for is what he's trying to ask.
Okay.
Your address, sir.
CB16 Jackson Road.
Mr. Chairman, just to reiterate from our opening remarks, the application is for site plan approval, conditional use approval, and subdivision. The subdivision would create 2 lots. One, the site plan and conditional use application seek the right to construct and operate an asphalt manufacturing facility, which is a conditionally permitted use on the site. And in addition, that is correct. We are seeking the planning variances for the lack of frontage on a public street.
you mentioned again asphalt manufacturing facility.
Asphalt manufacturing facility.
Are you asking, sir, whether asphalt is a
What you
byproduct
are
of
applying
oil?
for is for an asphalt mixing facilities for asphalt concrete, is that right?
Asphalt manufacturing facility, yes, sir.
Asphalt manufacturing is, asphalt is produced from
Oil.
oil.
We're going to present a witness who's a managerial executive of the operating company. It sounds like this question relates to the actual operation itself. So I would submit, ladies and gentlemen, that this question is probably best suited for the managerial executive of the company. Soon to follow.
Wait till the proper expert testifies, okay?
Okay, then I will ask Mr. Lincoln.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Betsy. I'm at about 32 Meadowview Drive in Lopatcong. And when you refer to we apply for in our sites, when you submit those reports to the DEP, is that then specifically on behalf of your client, 189 Strikers Road? I'm just trying to be clear.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
I lost one last one. My name is Peter.
Peter, last name is Olszewski, O-L-S-C-H-E-W-S-K-I. Very sorry. 48 J Lane here in Lopat. Question to the board, I don't know if I can ask, but did the board actually request a wildlife study at all?
Did the board request?
Yeah, did you guys?
No, they didn't.
And just for clarification, the people who employ you is the plant, right?
Is the what?
The people who are building the plant are the people who employ you, right? They pay your salary. The people who are wanting to build.
Oh, my salary, I don't know.
Who's requesting your services for?
I was hired by 189 Striker.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening, Scott Leifer, LEI, FDR, 32 J Lane. You noted in your testimony some other little tributary adjacent to the property. Are you referring to Dry Creek?
Well, the maps that I have don't have a name on it. I do know that there is another tributary southwest of the site that shows up on the U.S. Geological Survey. It could also be, it's not named, so it probably still is considered the Lopatcong Creek because there's a lot of different spots where it twists and turns.
Mr. Leifer is correct that the stream is called, it's actually called Dry Run.
Dry Run, okay.
Dry Run. It crosses Baltimore Street and Route 57.
A lot of the smaller tributaries that have layman names like that are all thrown under the bigger classifications of streams. So if it's a small tributary that's located very closely to a bigger named stream, they throw it right in. Or the stream book would be like that. And so what they end up doing is, if there are a lot of small tributaries that run into these streams, they break out sections of, like the Lopatcong Creek, although most of it is the highest classification you can get. As an example, if south of here it's less quality, they would say from the Lopatcong School to this bridge is this classification, and all of the tributaries that flow into that are classified as X. And then from this point to this point, all of the tributaries, including the stream, are classified as Y. In this case, everything around is the highest classification that you can get.
Okay, so that would be the same classification as the actual stream.
Yeah. So you're following how
Is this closer to the site than Lopatcong Creek itself?
No, they seem to be about the exact same distance.
Okay.
There seems to be anywhere from 650 to 850 feet.
All right. But it is flowing in the other direction towards Lopatcong Creek, in a north-south as opposed to...
Well, I mean, Lopatcong Creek's coming in from the south, from the northeast and flowing down towards the southwest, and then it breaks off this way, and another tributary is coming from the southwest and into the Lopatcong Creek. So they're all coming from different angles, and that creek goes like this. So, but flow is slow.
Okay, so it's flowing sort of past the site towards the creek.
It's flowing, one's flowing past the site. Yeah, one's flowing past the site,
okay.
And the other ones are not flowing past the site. They exist south of and lower elevation of.
All right, and that's what's called, is that an ephemeral stream? Is that the proper term I'm using, or a seasonal stream?
No, they're just a stream.
Okay.
You know, seasonal streams still under the Flood Hazard Act still are all considered streams. Okay. It's not like it's less quality if it doesn't have the same flow. Anything that conveys water is regulated. Even a roadside ditch that along a highway, if it flows into another stream, it's regulated, and it has the same value of what it's flowing into. So just because it's a cruddy little roadside ditch that gathered storm garbage, it still has that same high buffer on it.
Are there any of those cruddy little ditches that flow into the...
No, because they're regulated as well. If they were on the site, they would be regulated. They would get the same exact classification as a major stream. So if there's a regulated water course or wetland on the stream, it has to be verified by the DEP. Even the buffers of those.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Casella, 2 Byron Drive, Lopatcong Township. If I missed this, sir, I apologize in the answer to this question because I'm not an expert. Can you talk about buffers? Buffers from what?
Buffers are, in the state of New Jersey, freshwater wetlands and streams are regulated areas. Not just those areas, but areas adjacent to them are also protected. So you could have a 20-foot wide stream that's protected, and it could have a Category 1 classification. A Category 1 buffer would then happen. So you would have 600 feet of buffer.
Until what could happen?
Pardon?
After the 600 feet, what is it buffering from?
It's creating a transition area between developed areas and non-developed areas.
Are there any distinctions that are made as to what kind of developments can occur after the buffer?
No, but there's distinctions made based on the water quality of the wetland or the stream. In this case, we have the highest water quality stream that the site drains to, therefore has the biggest buffer. So it's the most restrictive buffer that you can get, which is still 400 feet from the property.
I still don't understand this. What can be built beyond the buffer?
Anything. And you can build it within the buffer as well with appropriate permits. You can build houses and roads and swimming pools and build any sort of building. You just have to get a permit to do it, and you have to do that within the confines of what the DEP says that you can do.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Corral, 37 Meadowview Drive. You mentioned that the stream is Class 1, highly sensitive.
Category 1.
Category 1, highly sensitive. Can you just...
Well, I didn't say highly sensitive, but it's Category 1. That's the class.
And you said that the stream also supports trout?
It has a trout production classification for wetlands.
That would be natural trout, naturally produced?
That's how they classify. The wetland classifications are non-trout, trout maintenance, trout production. And I think that they do base that on a trout's ability to naturally reproduce.
Which happens in this stream?
It has a trout production classification, so I'm sure that it does.
And would you agree that in New Jersey, trout production, natural production stream, fairly rare?
No. I think that probably in our area of New Jersey, I think that, in fact, Hunterdon County and Warren County probably has more trout production waters than trout maintenance or non-trout waters, and the highest amount of Category 1 water streams as well.
Can you talk about the fish, or is that another expert?
Well, it's irrelevant. There's no stream on the property. There's no issue about fish on this property.
Okay, well, the stream is close to the property, so there will be an issue with fish.
Well, the DEP has established strict regulations about how you can develop around Category 1 water, trout production waters. And those strict buffers are still nowhere near the property. So, I mean, they've set up really, really good guidelines to protect our water, to protect our wildlife, and they've done that.
Would you agree that trout are sensitive to the chemistry and biology of the water?
I'm not a fish expert, but I'm sure they use trout for a reason.
And you don't, in your professional opinion, the operation of this site and any effluent coming off of it will not affect the chemistry of the stream and affect the trout?
I'm not an asphalt expert, so I don't know about that, but I do know that if everything is complying to the regulations, specifically wetlands and buffers, we have complied.
Okay.
As soon as we get the letter of interpretation permit.
Oh, sorry. G-U-R-A-L.
Hi, Paul Corbett, 775 Specters Road. I was reading through the September 25th minutes, and on page 79, it was mentioned that there was no finalized storm drainage discharge that was yet to be determined. When you did your assessment, did you take into account of this biofilter that they're going to have?
Stormwater discharge is part of the development of the property. I'm there to preserve natural resources prior to development.
So the benefit of a breach of this biofilter, you don't take that into account? That's not part of your...
I'm not looking at potential development. I'm looking at state guidelines governing the protection of wetlands and streams.
Who would be the one to answer that question?
Probably an engineer, a weather expert.
Okay.
Name Aquila, M-I-N-G, last name A-Q-U-I-L-A. I live in 1325 Eagles Nest Court in Lopatcong. I have a quick question for the board. Is the decision made, part of the decision you guys passed, this ordinance or variance, is based on one of the environmental impact report produced by the company, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you, after your testimony, talking about that you are pretty much a wetland ecologist, but you are not truly like environmental scientist specialized in wildlife inventory or wildlife impacts that.
I do a lot of wildlife inventories. Environmental science is an extremely broad term. I'm very specific in my area.